From I Am Interchange, this is the Hatch podcast series. It is from the past that we are offered a glimpse of the future. And so it is with Co-Palace in Switzerland. In 1942, with all of Europe mired in World War II, Swiss diplomat Philippe Motu wrote, "If Switzerland is spared by the war, our task will be to make available for moral rearmament, a place where Europeans torn apart by hatred, suffering, and resentment can come together. Co is the place." When the opportunity to purchase the Co-Palace Hotel arose in 1946, Motu and Robert Handlüser, with the financial and physical help of hundreds of fellow Swiss citizens, realized his intentions. The first conferences graced the palace's grounds that summer, and the Co-Foundation, now Initiatives of Change, was founded that fall. The nonprofit foundation has utilized the space as an international center for reconciliation, dialogue, capacity building, and hope ever since. At the close of June 2023, thought leaders, activists, innovators, artists, and disruptors gathered at the palace to collaborate and commune in a Hatch impact co-creation ecosystem. During the 4-day peer-to-peer acceleration, attendees discussed project roadblocks, workshopped barriers to access and evolution, were inspired by speakers, and worked to develop achievable solutions capable of global impact. I'm Tate Chamberlin, and in this podcast, I host WEPOWER founder and CEO Charli Cooksey as we discuss activism and action and the circuitous nature of a heart-driven life and finding the light within the dark. What kind of toys did you have growing up?
I love and loved Batman. Man, Batman's my superhero. If I could be any superhero, I'd be Batman. I would be like a billionaire, bachelor, living in a mansion, and then by night, saving Gotham City. I feel like St. Louis, my hometown, in eerie ways, is too similar to Gotham City.
Will you walk me through why the honor of leading came into fruition for you?
So I was born and raised, and I'm 36, and until about a year and a half ago, lived on the same street, same block my entire life with my mom, and then my aunt lived next door. But that part of St. Louis is predominantly Black, full of brilliant, beautiful people, beautiful brick, and parks that foster community, and it has high crime, high poverty, significant disinvestment. It's the remnants of redlining and folks often, I think, seeing themselves as escaping. And so it's a very distressed and dilapidated area despite the power and potential of the people. And so woke up and fell asleep to gunshots and sirens and bullets and seeing folks around me navigate a lot of poverty. And I've often described my journey, and still to this day, as navigating the tale of two cities within a single St. Louis. And so ever since I was a little girl, I have been trying to reconcile these two truths in St. Louis. One part of St. Louis where I played tennis and trained in ballet was very white and affluent. And those folks had no idea that there was such a polar reality or different reality from theirs just 15 minutes away. And then I would come home to my area and realize this isn't normal. What we've been subjected to believe is normal is actually criminal. These conditions are criminal. But my neighbors, my students had no idea that there was another way to live life that was full of access and abundance and resources. So ever since I was a little girl, I knew I wanted to do work that reconciled these two truths and eliminate those disparities. And over time, I had different ideas, from being a civil rights attorney to elected leader to, at one point, I wanted to start a hip organization called Hip Hop Political, in high school, that fused politics with hip hop. But eventually, fast forward, came back to St. Louis after completing my undergraduate studies through a program called Teach for America. And I was bright-eyed and naive, thinking I could change the world one kid at a time, and was slapped in the face with my students live in the same neighborhood as me. They're waking up and falling asleep to the same realities and traumas that I've known for so long. And so that led me to start an education nonprofit. And that was an amazing journey. And we did some really impactful work, supported hundreds of scholars per year, middle school through college completion. But a few things happened during that time. One, Mike Brown was murdered, and he was the exact same age as our first graduating class of scholars. And so for me and the team, it was like, what does it mean for us to support these young folks with graduating from high school and preparing for college if someone who looks just like them, their same age, who just graduated the same week as they did, doesn't even have the opportunity to live a life post their senior year of high school. So between the murder of Michael Brown and the Ferguson uprising and being out there on the streets protesting and seeing the way that Black power is suppressed despite the urgency of us needing to exercise that power by night. And then by day, I was actually secretly going through a negotiation process for my org to fold and merge into another much older organization. And frankly, that wasn't my choice. And I had to navigate some very interesting power dynamics with wealthy older white men. And so I was seeing the way that power plays out with a few wealthy white men in boardrooms behind closed doors, and seeing the way the lack of power playing out by night with Black folks who yet again had to bear the brunt of police brutality. So the intersection of those two moments happening at the same time, while also realizing the young people that we were working with, although they were succeeding and thriving, they were navigating the fact that the education system is so interconnected to the carceral criminal justice system and the health system, the economic system. And so for me, I hit a point in my journey where I started to question, what is the most important resource for marginalized communities? And I landed on power. And so that led to WEPOWER. I wanted to create a space for Black and brown folks to build and wield power, dream of better futures, and then be able to wield that power towards those dreams that they could activate with the right set of political and economic power.
Just going back to you having your organization that was predominantly made for the Black community, and when it merged with a larger organization that was run by a completely different culture, did it lose the intention of your organization after that happened?
Oh, absolutely. It was a predominantly Black community, but about 30 to 20%, we had scholars from all over the world, from Afghanistan, from Sudan, from Vietnam, it was a beautiful melting pot, which actually isn't fully it's not even fully reflective it was more reflective of our world than it was of St. Louis. And so the way that cultures fuse and the way that we had nights that embraced everyone's culture and ate food and exchanged stories and learned about people's histories and met their families. And so yes, to that end, eventually they got rid of the entire organization. Doesn't even exist anymore. And things like there were pitches for things like to take the organization national, to scale it, to offer way better incentives and benefits for the team. And instead, it was a really harmful time for me and my team and the scholars. And that's part of the reason why the catalyst for WEPOWER, because I never wanted to be in a position again, and I never wanted the young folks who I felt accountable to be in a position where the lack of our organized power led to a few folks making decisions that did harm to young people.
And then from there, after you started WEPOWER, did you frame this as more of a positional power?
No, it's all kinds. So when our theory of power, starting with the definition for us, it's the ability to act or self-determine. And so we believe every single human being should have the ability to access a great education, the ability to live a life of their choice. And so for us at the simplest level, it's just the ability to do ... And we see power coming from three sources. And it could be one of those three, and then the perfect formula is when all those three sources are activated. So one source of power is organized people. So that's imagining 1,000 people showing up to protest. That's people organizing their bodies on the streets to demand something in particular. It could be organized money. So thinking about a membership association where people pay dues, and let's say those dues go towards, thing X. That's organizing money, and that's a way to activate power towards whatever the end goal is. And that third source is positional power, when someone is in a seat where they can literally make a decision for or against something. And so when we see the activation of all three, that's like the utopia. And the example that I often give is the NRA, the National Rifle Association. So it's a masterful case study of how they have millions of members. That's the organized people that have a shared goal and vision. They have millions of dollars coming in through annual dues, again, towards that shared vision. And they organize themselves, their votes, their dollars towards getting certain folks elected at the federal level that advance their goal of gun rights. And so imagine if we could organize those three sources of power for eradicating poverty, for building new thriving neighborhoods, for transforming our education system. When you think about most social movements, 1 to 3 of those were true for real change to happen.
And we talked a little bit about policy that's not governmental. And that, I don't know, a lot of times I think of policy as being governmental. What are some other examples of non-governmental policy that could be created?
Well, I would say the work that we do, the end goal is for them to become laws and policies housed out of government, but the policy development process itself is people-driven. So an example of that is we held a 2-year fellowship where we brought together a cohort of early childhood. For us, early childhood is the education system birth through 5. We brought together childcare educators, folks who run childcare centers, parents of babies, school board members, activists fighting to improve the childcare system. We brought together folks directly impacted by early childhood to reimagine that system and develop policies and laws. And then now, since that has been developed, that roadmap or playbook of ideal policies, we're now putting pressure on government to bring those policies into the fold. So for us, it's democratic policy design that then gets turned into campaigns for them to be passed into laws by government.
An example I liked that you gave also is, you called it community benefit agreements. There's a lot of gentrification coming in, and it's displacing marginalized communities and pricing them out. Walk me through this. I really liked this.
Yeah. So back to our pretty democratic and community-driven process for developing policies, we did some deep listening to community. We had one-on-one meetings where we just listened to folks' needs and dreams. We had community events. We had surveys that we distributed. And what surfaced was the biggest barrier in our region was that there weren't enough quality jobs that were accessible to Black folks in their neighborhoods. And so we scanned the policy world to see what policies are most responsive to that. And one of those was the community benefits agreement policy. And that's really exciting because it's a tool that can be used really towards anything. And the idea is that when a big development and developer comes into a neighborhood and they want to develop some big project, I don't know, let's say a mall, a soccer stadium, some luxury condos or apartments, in order for them to receive those public benefits or tax benefits and incentives, they have to negotiate with community and community representatives and provide specific benefits the community wants to see in order to get those, to receive those public benefits. So that could be the community could advocate for the development to have a childcare facility and for the childcare facility to have a sliding scale in terms of cost so that someone living in poverty can attend that same quality childcare center as someone with significant resources. Benefits could include storefronts for Black and brown entrepreneurs or affordable housing earmarked as part of that development. So really the sky is the limit. It could be a green space gets developed or a garden. And so again, that goes back to like that policy is really cool because it shifts power, and it shifts power to community members who have often had their power suppressed, and does so in a way that can lead to economic opportunities in their neighborhood, and for them to be able to stay and benefit from all the economic opportunities that will emerge from that development happening.
I like that. So as communities and cities grow and become more vibrant, adding this policy allows for the communities most vulnerable to stay intact and stay part of it?
Yeah, and to self-determine the future of that neighborhood with resources, the resources of the developer. So it's not just like a dream, but it's like these are tangible things that will emerge from it.
Are you having a lot of success with it?
Right now we're in the design phase. So that's one solution we're pursuing. We also know there's other solutions. In our listening, we also heard that folks don't just want to survive, but they want to thrive, which means they want to build wealth. They want to have resources and dollars they can pass on to future generations. So we're trying to research and also listen to what are other solutions that can go well with the community benefits agreement policy that really create a holistic approach to securing the rights and wealth of Black and brown folks while staying in their neighborhoods. So, but yeah, it's been building a lot of momentum, and we've been having really cool conversations with developers, with elected leaders, with philanthropists, with neighbors. And so I think the potential is vast, but it goes back to like, will we have built enough power to put pressure on local government to pass this into law?
I was interviewing Andre Perry a couple Hatch summits ago. The topic was bridging the wealth gap, and he has this book.
Know Your Price.
Yeah, Know Your Price. Yeah, so good. And yeah, so building this generational wealth since the end of the Civil War and since people of color have been allowed to own land, it's been predominantly valued by 90% white people. Mm-hmm. And that over that devaluation over the last century has led to like trillions of dollars of missed income for the Black community. And so when we talk about generational wealth, implementing a policy like the community benefits agreement will help not only keep communities in place, but also keep property value going up to create that generational wealth transfer.
Yeah, as the community and the properties there start to have more value all of a sudden because white folks are moving in, it's getting gentrified. The folks who have chosen to call that place home, or maybe were stuck in that area, they're able to stay there and build and benefit from the resources that grow from there. Because often we'll see the value of a neighborhood or a home increase the further away Black folks are from that area. And so, exactly. And then also we're looking at a model called community wealth building, which is a framework to think about how the new economy can and should function. And one of the key principles of community wealth building is like democratic control of assets. And so one of the things that we have seen make this country, air quote, great is the hoarding of resources and assets. And a really cool example of how we can democratize assets is through worker-owned companies, where it's not just about a few folks having ownership in the company, but the workers can be the owners of a company, and they can make democratic decisions about benefits and about salaries and wages. And when you think about the household wealth disaggregated by race, the household wealth for white folks, the median is well over 100,000 compared, if you take away assets, if you take away things like cars and televisions, for Black folks is about $1,700, which is ludicrous, but also not shocking given the history. Difference. Yeah, given the history of policies in our country. But there's some really cool research that shows the median wealth of someone who's part of a worker-owned company is over 100,000. And so there are ways that we can shift the outcomes and like really address these disparities by really thinking about democracy and shifting power, which back to our theory is that power is the greatest currency. The power of workers can literally increase their wealth, or the power of community members to have say or voice in a childcare system can increase the outcomes for those who are part of the childcare system.
I think you framed it as the silver tsunami. So in the next 20 years, as baby boomers pass on, they'll transfer this great wealth, $68 trillion it's estimated. And when baby boomers were the same age as now millennials, they held 23% of the wealth. And now millennials, as they're the same age, they hold 3% of the wealth. Mm-hmm. And this go around with the wealth transfer, that statistic's supposed to get way worse with way more money. And I think putting it in the lens of a Black community, that's even like much smaller. And then it led to like people who have money say they don't care about it. I want to explore this with you. Just the wealth transfer, the differentiation of who will get it, and just I don't know, maybe fake, like when people have money, there's like this fake non-caring about the value of it.
Yeah. I think like there's small and big ways that like we can call folks out on that. Like if you don't care, then give it all away.
Nice.
Just do it. And so I think it's easy for folks to talk a good game, and the proof is in the pudding. Like how do you use your resources and towards what end? And I don't really know the answer about that, how to shift that reality, but I think it's an immense opportunity. And if we don't think imaginatively about how to redistribute some of that, as much as possible of that wealth to be more distributed among folks in our country, it's opportunity we should seize. And I think it's going to take creativity. And I think it is complicated though. I don't know how you pass a policy that says like some of your wealth should go to someone other than your choice or choosing. So I don't know the solution, but I do think that there's something that we should do about that.
In white culture, you can make the argument that a lot of people in white culture won't have access to this wealth transfer either. And so then you could frame that the dollar only has value because we agree that it does. And a lot of people who I know who are predominantly white would say that that's where crypto comes in. And because this new generation who doesn't have access to the dollar yet has kind of created its own currency that they all agree holds value.
I'm not a crypto expert or connoisseur, but are you saying that the folks that create it and then that are investing in crypto don't have US dollar net worth?
No, I think that they do, but it's way less than like your typical millionaire who would say they don't care about money. There's this new investment and buy-in to a new type of economy. Yesterday, you kind of brought it back a little bit, because when you're living in the red line, that's a risk to take that might not be worth it. Yeah,
I mean, it's all relative. Like, I think one of the challenges of capitalism is that the person never feels like they have enough money. And so like folks who might have a few $100,000 feels like that's nothing because they're comparing their dollars or wealth to the millionaire, and the millionaire's comparing their dollars and wealth to the billionaire. And the billionaire's comparing their dollars and worth and wealth to the highest net worth person in the globe. And so I think a lot of this goes back to like paradigm and mindset shift, like what is enough and what is too much. And I think that there's like a fundamental number that I think we should be working with, or fundamental scale where like, does a family have enough for them to meet their basic needs, for them to have quality housing, for them to send their kid to childcare, for them to be able to access healthcare? And so one thing, and MIT has a calculator called the living wage calculator, and it like shows like if you live in Montana, you have no kids, this is your living wage number. Or if you have 3 kids, this is your living wage number, like how much you should bring in as salary. So I'm kind of going on a tangent, but I'm saying that to say that I think there's this perception of folks not having enough money, but I think that that's because the way that capitalism works, we're always aspiring towards more, when more leads to us exploiting and extracting and this dissatisfaction with our life and what we have, even though it might be enough. And so back to the cryptocurrency piece, it's easier to take risk when you have some type of cushion. And so I think that it's a new form of currency that, let's play with it. Let's take risks. Let's test it out. But I think it's dangerous to assert that this is like the path towards folks who've experienced hundreds of years of being exploited, for this to be the path towards their lives changing, when there's like not enough research or data or stability in that currency system to prove otherwise. And when we see some of the crypto is like crashing and some of the folks are going to prison, and we know the US dollar is still of value. We know that home ownership can still build wealth. We know that a living wage job can be a make or break for someone or for a family going from surviving to thriving. And so I think there are traditional paths that have built wealth for a lot of Americans, and like Black folks, poor folks deserve to access that and not be the guinea pigs for something that hasn't been tested and proven as like a stable source of wealth building.
Do you think about reparations?
Oh, absolutely.
Walk me through something that's really working you within it.
It's necessary. It's a non-negotiable.
What would it look like? What is a way of reparations that you envision?
I don't know actually, but I know that it's multifaceted. It's about the financial, it's about the atonement and the healing and reconciliation. And I think it's about the access to it I think it's not limited. Like, I think that there's a lot of nuance, and it shouldn't just be limited to like someone who's a descendant of a slave. Like, we look at the history of this country, we transition from one form of slavery to another form of slavery. And so really, I think any Black person in America that has been here for even a few years, which is why I get why it's so complicated, is worthy of some type of reparations, because there's slavery, there's Jim Crow, there's mass incarceration, there's redlining. I mean, we can go on and on and on about the ways that exploitation has like transformed and redefined itself. And then when you compound that, so when you think about a family that are descendants of slavery and then had to navigate Jim Crow and then had to navigate the next thing and the next thing, it's old to us and in large quantities and sums. And I think it's easy for me to say this from a place of privilege, but I hope that we don't default to the simplest answer and miss out on Black folks will never be able to access the reparations that are commensurate with the trauma and the dollars that have been stripped from us. But I do hope that it's a transformational amount of money. And so that's my thoughts, but I don't have deep thoughts on it, except it's a necessity. We should lean into it being as close to commensurate as possible, although there's no way to measure the trauma and harm done. And it shouldn't just be limited to direct descendants of slaves.
Does it need to be an act of Congress, or could reparations look like something else?
I mean, we're seeing examples of it at the local level. So there's a few regions. Asheville, North Carolina passed a reparations bill. I don't know if it's dangerous, but I do think that the vastness of how different folks are defining it can make it harder for us to go for the big reparations package, if that's the right language, because if we call everything reparations, then it's going to get to a point where it's like, you have reparations.
Got it. But it might be like this patchwork version of it instead of the full necessity.
I think it would probably serve us well if we had nuance. Like these are like calling local level reparations, like this is a local reparations package or project, but that's no substitute for the congressional reparations that needs to happen.
If you can do something, do something. So if your university offer scholarships, if your Hatch offers scholarships, if you have 10 houses and want to partake in the patchwork of smaller reparations. I don't
consider that reparations. To me, that's just being a good human. Like if you have it, share it.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Which is why I say there's the nuance. Like if we call everything reparations, then I think it lets off our country for the real responsibility they have to address the harm done. And like back to I do think there's multiple parts of it. It's as much about the healing and reconciliation as it is about the dollar. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Like if I have to ride the train in Geneva, if I have 2 sandwiches and someone next to me is hungry, like that's not reparations. That's just like, why would I hoard 2 sandwiches if I only need 1 or if I only need half a sandwich? Yeah,
it's almost maybe tit for tat. Just like there's always a balance that has to be made in every transaction when it could just be being a good person.
Yeah. And I don't know if good person is the right language, but it's like at some point, which is I think part of the problem and why we have so many social crises, is that like our lack of humanity. Like I think that although it's idealistic, I hope we get to a point where we just see the humanity in others, and that is as normal as the air we breathe, is to like share and be communal.
How do we align values with such different cultures?
I think that we have so much more in common than we realize. And I do think it goes back to that humanity piece. And like the more we recognize the humanness in all of us, we're literally all humans. And like how I mean, I don't know much about Russian culture or Ukrainian culture, but if I were to imagine being a fly on the wall in the home of a Russian family right now, well, maybe not right now, but the home of a Russian family, I imagine there is a culture of love and care for one another, and like families trying the best they can to make sure there's food on the table and folks get a decent education. And so I think there are values that are true across every race, ethnicity, country. But the breakdown is that like this homogenous culture is maybe the underlying thing that gets in the way, where because we look different or because we live in a different part of the world or because of our perceived difference in our ancestry, that divides us when we really are all human. And so I think that, I don't know if there needs to be like a storytelling campaign, if we need to be indoctrinated, but I don't understand how we don't see everyone as human. And I do think that I do think there's more in common with darker skinned folks across the world and with folks who have historically been marginalized in terms of a culture of empathy. I mean, is her name Candace? Yesterday, like the ability to have empathy, to forgive, for reconciliation, I think the tolerance for that and the openness to that is so much higher for folks who have bared the brunt of harm. So there's something there. And women, like we see the way that women have more empathy and the way that yields like better outcomes when they run companies and when they run government. And so I do think there's something to be said about like studying the culture and the values of marginalized folks across the country and seeing those themes and figuring out how do we do that at scale. But I think it just goes back to humanness.
What does it mean to be wrong?
The older I get, the more I realize that's a tricky one. Man, it's hard. It's hard to create that dichotomy between right and wrong because it really depends on context, the circumstances, the resources. There's just so much that goes into it, so much. And so I think at the end of the day, we all know in our heart, like, is this the right or wrong thing to do given the current circumstance? And then we got to do what we have to do. But I'm saying this, like, I subconsciously call people evil all the time. But I also...
But are they 100% wrong when you call them evil?
You mean in that decision or as a being?
In that decision.
Oh, yeah, they can be 100% wrong. I mean, I think that Trump is wrong. Many of his decisions, most, if not all of his decisions are wrong. It's just like some things are black and white. But I think your average human, we're often between a rock and a hard place, and we're making decisions out of survival. And so, like, that's one of the reasons I believe in abolition and, like, eradicating the prison system. That because people are often, your everyday person is often making a decision out of an effort to survive. Like, that we incarcerate folks for drug use and substance abuse. I think that, to me, that's criminal. Like, did we provide the resources for them to not have to rely on drugs? Are we addressing the root causes of mental health, or the fact that they're living in poverty, or the fact that they might be experiencing domestic abuse? There's so many things that I think we don't consider when we define something right versus wrong. And then when you add the layer of laws determining what's right or wrong and incarcerating someone based on these very subjective laws that are usually racist and written from a place of privilege, it leads to over-incarceration of folks who have actually been victims of criminal social systems and racism. What are you thinking?
I'm part of the LGBT community, and though I'm not a person of color, I do like see that the laws were written from a place of privilege, and I see where my culture in the LGBT community totally falls through the cracks in this unseen way. And it's really frustrating, I think. And it makes me, I don't know, I really like talking about pirate culture. I think I'm really drawn towards cultures and communities who have kind of come together and have been built when governments don't have their back.
Yeah.
It's just like a really special place in my heart.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And the example that I think of, which isn't tied to the LGBTQ community, is there's this woman somewhere in the Midwest, I think, lied about her residence so that her kid could go to a better school. And it's like, okay, if you just look at this black and white, yeah, that's wrong. But she was making a decision out of the need for her child to access a great education. And I think about how the healthcare system isn't designed for trans folks, and like whatever decision they make to make sure that they have access to quality healthcare is not wrong. Like, in my opinion, I think that if we could rewrite our Constitution or just get rid of it and have it written by the folks at the margins, I think that our world would be better for it.
Yeah, because right now, I think where the gray area in what it means to be wrong is people are doing whatever it takes to survive. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Who's resisting you?
Well, myself first. I'm at a place of getting clearer about who I am and who I have the potential to be. And the realization of that potential hinges on me embracing it and like living a different life and having a different mindset and different practices that are part of my daily life. So myself first. And I would say folks who benefit from the status quo, benefit whether it's financially, benefit whether it's like just the comfort of like being able to navigate the known, or benefit in the sense of like them being able to maintain their power and influence. Yeah, it's been a wild ride. Even on sabbatical, I've gotten calls and texts in the middle of the night because we're in Switzerland and it's a 7-hour time difference. I got a screenshot in the middle of the night 2 nights ago from someone who's trying to take like legal action against my organization. Literally, it makes no sense. Like, I'm an open book. We're super transparent, and they're like requesting to see communication between us and like elected leaders with this like implying that like we're doing backdoor deals. And it's like, no, if you look at our policy track record, we're trying to get more money for babies. Like, what is wrong with that?
Yeah, and there's got to be communication with the people who you would be dealing with.
Yeah, it's no secrets happening. Like, you can come to the meetings, you can sit down with me. But yeah, there's been consistent attacks on social media, misinformation, local newspapers, just all the things, verbal abuse, written abuse, infiltration of the organization that I've found it. But at the end of the day, I think it goes back to what I said. It's folks who would rather stick with what they know than lean into the risk of a new world and a new future. And that honestly doesn't deter me. It's what deters me is the folks who I would say have the capacity to be part of the front line disrupting the status quo, who retreat so quickly because of those attacks. Like, that breaks our power. If we don't stay organized as a group of people, then the opposition wins. And the opposition is the status quo and inequity and disparity.
What are some of the questions that aren't being asked right now?
I actually don't think it's about what questions aren't being asked. I think it's more so about, are we willing to do the uncomfortable things to create a new world? I think we have the answers, enough of the answers to start making a pivot towards a new world. I think that we just need to do it. And we need to do it with a fanatical discipline that's measurable. And I consider myself a creative. I'm a creative at heart, which is one of the tensions I think I felt that caused my sabbatical, that I was so in the weeds of like creating slide decks and like the technical aspects of running an org that I had lost the opportunity, and I had given up the space of leaning to the creativeness of building something new. But saying all that to say that like there is something about the intersection of creativity and like science and the math of it. And we can measure almost anything. And that means we can measure poverty. We can measure the health of our environment. We can measure the academic success of a school. And I think that the folks who say we want transformation and to create a new role, I don't think we've been disciplined enough about measuring the things, aligning our actions and strategies to shifting those outcomes, and then doing so with a sense of fanatical discipline. There are things that work, and like, if we truly want to see a different world for our young people, we need to like have a laser focus and discipline about leaning into what works while still committing to innovation and all those things and like pivots and changes along the way. But I think that a lack of commitment to measuring our effectiveness in being creative or effectiveness in seeking change is like, it's fluff, it's BS.
Maybe I could reframe my question with your answer. Maybe what's being left out of the conversation would be what you answered.
Yeah, I think it's the discipline around measuring outcome shifts when we say we seek and want social change.
Would you rather be a dictator for a day or keep the slow pace of democracy?
I think the easy route is to be a dictator. The most successful route is democracy. Systems change is so much more than changing a law on paper. We have to shift hearts and mindsets. It's been said all week, change happens at the speed of relationships. And so that policy is only as good as the ecosystem of our relationships, our mental models around the issue and the solution, our willingness to like not find loopholes so that we like go around the solution. And so I would like the simplicity of a dictator, but it won't yield the outcomes that we need. And yeah, democracy is hard and slow and messy, but it's also beautiful. Like the journey and process of it is as, to me, powerful as the outcome, because we're building our muscles to do this for the next thing and the next thing. And I think it allows us to lean into the new normal and see the humanity in everyone, because the 14-year-old who I'm sitting at this table with in a vigorous debate might have a solution that I would have never thought of. And I think democracy allows us to, one, guarantee that we won't have a dictatorship, but also allows us to learn and have to recognize and wrestle with other people's truths and decisions.
Yeah, maybe avoid, if you had a dictator making all of these, maybe you could call them extreme decisions because they're so drastic. There might be unintended consequences because the stories haven't been like filtered through, as you were saying.
We use this framework for systems change. There's 6 conditions, and it says like the most surface level, but we always think about the policies and the laws and the resource flows, but the most at the core, the root are the mental models, relationships, power dynamics. But Brown versus Board of Education is a great example where by law, schools became desegregated, but in a place like St. Louis, folks argue, according to the data, that we're more segregated. Our public school system is more segregated today than right after the Brown versus Board of Education legislation. And so we changed the law on paper, but we haven't shifted the hearts and mindsets of how we embrace one another, our willingness to co-learn, co-live side by side with folks who don't look like us. And so that policy means so much on paper, and it's something we should leverage, but we have to do the deep, complicated work of shifting our hearts and mindsets as much as we do changing a law on a piece of paper.
When we talk about keeping Black neighborhoods intact, I mean, if a white person moves in, is that automatically gentrification, or could that be what you're talking about, like an attempt at building community between cultures?
Yeah, I mean, I think that to me, gentrification is when folks are forced to move out and aren't able to benefit from the economic resources that are now being produced in that neighborhood, and when folks can afford to move in a way that displaces other folks. And back to the devaluation, when all of a sudden, because a certain group of folks moved in, the area becomes worth more, the cost of living goes up. So I think it's something about majority. When a majority of the situation does more harm than good, if that makes sense.
Sure.
To those who have been there.
And I was thinking, I think it was the New York Times, they had this experiment with appraisers and people purchasing homes. They had photos of Black families and white families in the homes, and that made a difference in the valuation of it. Yeah. So I wonder if that would happen if even a low income white person moved into a Black neighborhood, if that would be the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whose reality do you think will rule the future?
I think that we get to choose that. It's up to us to answer that. So if we do our work right, then there will be no single person's reality that chooses the future. But if I were to put my dictator hat on, I think if we saw the world from the lens of a Black mother, we would be telling a different story. And I'm not a mother, to be clear, but I think there is something magical, despite how human they are, although we don't recognize humanity, about the perspective, the resilience, the nurturing, the empathy of Black mothers that provides a grace and optimism and love that I think our world needs.
What brings you hope?
I would say right now it's that we can create everything. Anything can be created. Like, we can create our way out of problems. We can create our way towards solutions. We can create our way towards freedom. And so I think the fact that I'm spiritual but not Christian, the fact that like God has given us all the power to create, and I'm hopeful about the intersection between all of our ability to create and what that can yield if enough of us are willing to create from a place of humanness and possibility. Like, we create wars. We can create love. That's so corny, but like, we can create whatever we want to create. And I think that's what gives me hope.
This is the Hatch Podcast. Charli, it's been really great getting to know you this week, and I'm really glad that you made it to Hatch, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We often believe that once we discover our true passion, everything else will fall into place. It's finding that sense of purpose that feels like the real challenge. When we finally define our purpose, it illuminates the path ahead, helping us navigate the obstacles that may arise. But for many, Cooksey included, that isn't the whole story. From a young age, she has known that her calling lies in uplifting marginalized communities, no matter how those lines are drawn, and in reshaping policy to ensure equal opportunity, access, and prosperity for all. Yet, that dream has often been put on hold, not out of apathy, but due to the weight of systemic barriers. What happens when passion alone isn't enough? When the flames of our dreams struggle to burn against the oppressive forces of social, political, and economic systems that seek to maintain control? In those moments, when the fire fades and darkness surrounds us, how do we continue to forge ahead with our aspirations, our visions for a better world, and our desire to help others, without losing our way? These are the pivotal moments that test our character. Cooksey stands at this critical crossroads, grappling with the pressing need for rest while feeling an unwavering commitment to move forward. This is activism in its rawest form, transformative yet often painful. The right path for her, as for all of us, is the one that resonates deeply within her soul. For some, this might mean sacrificing personal comfort, even life, for a cause greater than themselves. For others, it's about recognizing that a dream deferred is still a dream worth holding on to. For Cooksey, it's a narrative still unfolding, rich with potential yet tinged with heartache, a story in the making. Despite her struggles and the weight of her experiences, she reminds us and herself that we have the power to create, to shape our world, and to keep dreaming.
It seems now more than ever that we have found ourselves on the cusp of monumental worldwide change. Whether we consider the environment, politics, infrastructure, health, economics, or inequities across a broad swath of social constructs, the consensus is clear and urgent. All is not as it should be. The United Nations, a consortium of 193 member states from around the globe, agrees. In 2015, the UN unanimously adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. These goals call for urgent action and global partnership to secure peace and prosperity for people and the planet, now and into the future.
In alignment with the SDGs, Hatch, a curated network of artists, activists, and entrepreneurs working together to accelerate positive global change, has partnered with I Am Interchange to fuse adventure journalism with experiential design labs to develop innovative solutions to complex global challenges. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoy it, please subscribe or leave us a rating. This episode was produced by Yara Craner, Susan Karstensen, and me, Tate Chamberlin. A shout out to our media and production team, Jessica Byerly, Darko Sevilla, Jacob Desch, Sean Mackinson, Amin Yarsu, and Zane Giordano. A special thanks to Yara Craner, Jared Silverman, Pete Strom, Eitan Shapira, Rachel Hicks, Roshi Gavechi, Anya Bulis, Tania Sanders, Erica Mackey, Raymond Unsodagi, Mark Gerner, Elke Govertson, Ignacio Packer, Kyle McGrew, Eskil Björkestrand, Joshua Lesser, and the rest of the Hatch team and crew from CoPalace for hosting me. Thank you. With so much gratitude to the Hatch supporters, Steelcase, the Kauffman Foundation, the Gwydion Fund, Envision Equality, the Hatch Volunteers, Board of Directors, Hatch Guardians, and the community who help make this work and mission possible. To learn more about Hatch, visit hatchexperience.org. Building community could not happen without food. And with that, I'd like to thank Whistle Pig Korean, Red Tractor Pizza, and Zocalo Coffee House. Do you have an issue that's riddled by gridlock in your community? Shoot me an email at tate@iaminterchange.org. That's tate@iaminterchange.org. Remember, share airtime and don't ruin dinner.